I'm in the business of recording time in a way. Is what I mean by that is some people aren't going to be around in 10 years. Some places are going to disappear in 10 years. Like when I drive through a little town in Nebraska, there used to be something when the railroad was there, but now the railroad closed and there's 5 people living there. It always made me think, how do they want to be remembered? And it is not about me going in to say to the nomads, I have an idea of how the world should be, and I want you to help me to make the world a better place. That is not my job as a filmmaker. My job is to go in there and ask them, how would you like to be remembered? And work on my film from that direction, from inside out. And inevitably, they're going to touch on, especially that because I'm attracted to people who live in the periphery of the society, they're going to touch on some kind of political message. But it comes from within them first. So Nomadland is as much about solitude and human dignity as it is about, for me, community and any kind of political message that's embedded in there. When I get to a certain age, I start to ask, I have this anxiety about some questions that my friends who has belong to a group that has answers for, like why we're here, where are we going after we die, all that, and why do I feel pain and why do I feel this and that. And so I think those questions led me to a connection with South Dakota, with the Badlands, with nature. And I was trying to find some answers and some solace in the spirituality that can come out of feeling like you're part of something bigger, not necessarily a god or anything, but this universe. And it does sound a bit new agey, but those were the things that were bothering me when I was in my late 20s, when I couldn't digest pizza anymore. And then one day I just go, fuck, I have this hangover and I'm lactose intolerant. So I need to figure out where I belong, like how does this work? So prepare for my eventual death. those quarter life questions. And then, so then inspiration wise, that's how it is, so every film, Nomadland, I haven't really been around people of that age. Group and dealing with death and loss in their lives. I haven't experienced a lot of that in my own, and being around them, seeing how they persevere and how they, after losing everything that defined them, and find a way to redefine themselves. It's really encouraging. It makes me feel good about growing old, and that's not a bad thing. Even though in our society we treat our elders like shit, but yeah. I think a lot of times directing and is about problem solving, so I read a book, and in the book, Jessica Bruder's book was the research she's done is so incredible, and she's captured the scale of the places and the people she's captured in her book. So I wanted to have as much of that as possible. So that isn't a problem, and how do you solve that? It's about creating a character that has a strong enough of an emotional core that is going to lead us through this journey. And then the problem is, even if you do that, how do you find someone that can command the presence of a listener that is strong enough that the audience will travel with her, will sit with her in a very busy world we live in, and be patient enough to listen to someone like Swanky and Linda May, who are usually ignored by society. That problem is solved when your producer is Frances McDormand, who can act in the film. So these decisions are very much started with the book. And I feel like there's a world I wanted to enter into. And then you start to solve the problem along the way of how can you make that into a fictional film that the audience hopefully will stay awake for. If you go out there and if you have a philosophy of how you want to make the film, and then you set these limitations for you. For example, we only use 3 sets of lenses. We will not use any other lenses. And and we will only shoot a certain time of day, only backlighting the characters. Rarely will you see a front light shot in this film. When there is usually is like there's no other way, we have to do it. When you set those limitations on your cinematic language, then I think you're gonna give yourself a lot more freedom to roam. And that's when these spontaneous moments going to present yourself. And when they do present yourself, they're usable because they're shot within those limitations and it is consistent with the rest of your film. The improvisational thing, yes, there's about 5% of the film is we did find in the moment, but most of them are, if not a few days before, I had met someone and then I would still write scenes for them. The same process, talking to the right scenes so they get pages on the day. I learned that from my first film, which I shot without a script. It's a big mistake because don't shoot a film with a treatment. At least that's what my advice would be, because treatment makes sense sometimes because those between the paragraphs, some of these things that will present itself in the script format, you're missing scenes. You will realize that you're missing scenes that connects some of the scenes in the treatment. And that was really detrimental for my first film. So even if I knew most likely this person is going to improvise, I still write the scene for them. So I know there's a shoebox. If nothing works, I can always pull out my script and say, this is why I'm doing this. And so I can react on set. I forced myself to write a one pager. I Nomadland, because I was gathering all these things and have all these ideas, and I go, how am I ever going to pull this off? This is too much. Can these non-perfection actually do this and that? Because you overwrite plot, because you think I need to have a lot of plot to keep the audience. Is really, the plot, they say character plot, which one is first? I find I have a tendency to go for plot, and that's in school, and that could be very dangerous. And I do think make sure that's why the one page is good, because you can't fill that much in, and you just keep it one page. And if you can't describe your plot in a Wikipedia page, that plot summary, then you've got a problem. If you can't make it interesting in that sort of, no, I have to do all this, then you have no space for character.
My husband worked at the USG mine in Empire. I was a substitute teacher.
It is a tough time right now. You may want to consider early retirement.
I need work. I like work.
Write the absolute necessary. And the main beat, the main heartbeat, the veins or the outer, what do you call it? The key ones that's gonna keep your heart beating. Get those in and look at it and say, do I really need everything else? I know this is the opposite of what I'm saying about, but don't shoot with that. Sometimes when you're lost in your script, it's really good to just go back and look at that form. I did that both on The Writer and Nomadland, and that's when I realized I had a movie. There's something in the beauty of imperfection in the way that I'm looking for. And nowadays, even big CGI things, you're trying to put imperfection in the camera move to have this feeling of being a human behind it.
Right. Like the fake shake to the camera.
Something, to make it feel like there's a mistake. There's an art form for that. And when you don't have a lot of budget and stuff, you really have to ask yourself, what is my advantage? We only had 80 grand to make The Writer, and you have to ask, what is it that I have that I can make with 80 grand that people with 80 million couldn't do? And a lot of times it's this kind of imperfection, authentic moment that you're going to get, and those sunsets. And also, don't let that be ruined in the edit. Keep some of that imperfections in there. Don't, the reason why I bring this up when you mention Cat is the way Ludovico's music and his piano is actually doesn't fit. You could move these two tracks a little bit and they will be perfectly in sync. But there's something about being just a little bit off, and everyone, the producers reacted, go, oh, I like it that it's off. I said, okay, so I'm not the only one. And you think about that in your edit room, when you go in there and really study your footage and talk to your editor, say like, what can we sort of safe in there that is going to make this film just has a little bit of that flavor. I think it helps. Depends on what kind of film you're making. A great cinematographer needs a great production designer. There's no, unless you're shooting very, very long lenses. That's the trick. It really is. And so he built the van himself, having referenced all these paintings, the texture, the portrait paintings, and of seeing how the texture and how they enhance the light on these portrait paintings, and using very similar texture and tone to pace around Fern's van, so we can film, so we can absorb light the way that it does around Fern. So Josh done a lot of that kind of prep work himself.
And he was the production designer, we should point out again. Is it true that video games were also a visual influence? I know it seems
yes,
weird,
but... it's huge for me. I love, don't laugh at me, but I love playing those kind of video games. You just walk around. I don't want to deal with zombies and all that stuff, quests and stuff. I
love nature.
Well, I did play EverQuest, which has a little bit of a chopping here and there, but I like walking around and collecting stuff and trading stuff and making stuff. Call me a girl. And I love that. And so I think when I'm wandering in these video games, it's very wide angled and it's very experiential. And so I'm going like, this stuff is addictive. How can I use that in my little bit less addictive indie film? And that's what we did. The long shot of Fern walking through the RTR, the video game was a big influence, because what it does is that it has a character in there, but it's filling the frame with a lot of stuff going on, and it just sort of move away a little bit to just hold on a little bit. I mean, there's nothing new, great. Malik's been doing this for a long time, and then coming, finding it. And that to me is kind of where we're going. I think a lot of the younger generation, because of cell phone and how wide. Yes, but I played this game called The Trail. This one is awesome too. But the how like younger generation, they have their cell phone, and you guys, I guess, the younger generation, and it's very wide angle. It's getting wider and wider, and that's kind of the direction we're going until it becomes 3D and 4D, virtual reality, whatever. So I do think, as a filmmaker, I do think it's important for me to get with the technology, to understand, because cinema is such a young form, and it's still at the infant state, and how films are seen and how films are made, so much is affected by technology, and I feel like it needs to evolve with technology to survive. And as a filmmaker, I don't want to just jump on the train, but I think you have to understand the rules to break them.